I found the photo negative in my sister's attic, tucked inside a dusty album she'd sworn was lost. My fingers shook as I held it to the window light. There was Sarah, my baby girl, just 5 years old, and my sister Helen's hands forcing her head under the lake water. 30 years of grief collapsed into one sharp, cold truth. It wasn't an accident. Helen murdered my child. I had to make her confess today, before the family reunion tonight. I slipped the negative into my pocket, my heart pounding a ragged rhythm. Downstairs, the doorbell rang. Helen's voice called out, cheerful and light, asking if I needed help with the potato salad. I forced my breathing steady, descending the stairs. She stood in the hallway, smiling, her eyes scanning me with an unnerving focus. She mentioned she'd been looking for that old album, said it had precious memories. My throat tightened. I told her I hadn't seen it. She stepped closer, her perfume suffocating, and patted my arm. "You look pale, Maggie. Everything all right?" I nodded, moving toward the kitchen. On the counter, my phone lit up with a text from my son, asking if I'd seen Helen's recent bank statements. I opened the attachment she'd sent him by mistake, a scanned document showing a withdrawal of $50,000 the week after Sarah died. Then, my grandson ran in, holding a small, water-stained doll I hadn't seen in decades, Sarah's favorite from the day she died. Helen snatched it from his hands, her smile frozen. "Where did you get this?" she demanded, her voice a low hiss. I noticed the doll's dress was clean, unlike the muddy one from the accident report. Helen's eyes met mine, and for a second, fear flickered in them. She quickly composed herself, shooing my grandson away. "I kept it for memories," she said, too smoothly. I knew then she'd planted the doll here, today, for a reason. I glanced out the window and saw a car I didn't recognize parked across the street, engine running, someone watching the house. I knew what I had to do. Get to Helen's house and search for more evidence before the reunion. I was losing my sanity, every breath laced with the image of Sarah's struggle. I drove to Helen's, my knuckles white on the wheel. Her car was gone. She'd texted she was at the store. I used the spare key she'd given me years ago, slipping inside. The place was impeccably clean, but I headed straight for her study. Her computer was password protected, but I found a handwritten ledger in a drawer, detailing large cash movements around the time of Sarah's death. My hands trembled as I photographed the pages. Suddenly, the front door creaked open. I froze, clutching the ledger. Helen's voice echoed, calling for her cat. I ducked behind the desk, heart hammering. She walked past the study, her phone to her ear, speaking low. "I told you it's handled. The old lady's suspicious, but she has no proof." My blood ran cold. She was talking about me. Then, her cat jumped onto the desk, knocking a framed photo to the floor. The glass shattered, revealing a second photo hidden behind it. Helen and a man I didn't recognize, standing by the lake the day Sarah died. Helen rushed in at the noise, her eyes widening at the mess. "What are you doing here, Maggie?" she demanded, her voice sharp. I stood up, holding the ledger, looking for answers. She snatched it from me, her face a mask of rage. "You have no right." I noticed the man in the photo was the same one from the car outside my house. Helen saw my recognition and smiled coldly. "He's a friend, very protective." She stepped closer, her voice dropping. "Leave this alone, Maggie. For your sake." My phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Stop digging, or you'll end up like your daughter." I needed to identify the man in the photo and link him to Helen's past. I was isolated. I couldn't trust anyone in the family now. Back home, I dug through old boxes, finding Sarah's case file I'd kept hidden. The police report listed Helen as the sole witness, her statement flawless. But now, I saw inconsistencies, timelines that didn't match. I scanned the man's photo and ran it through a facial recognition app on my phone. It flagged him as a former business partner of Helen's, declared bankrupt years ago. My phone rang. It was Helen, her voice sweet. "Maggie, I'm so sorry about earlier. Let's talk at the reunion. Clear the air." I agreed, hanging up quickly. Then, my grandson called, crying, saying a man had approached him at school, asking about me. I rushed to the school, my fear spiking. The principal said it was just a concerned parent, but I knew better. Back home, I found my back door slightly ajar, the lock picked. Nothing was taken, but on my kitchen table lay a single, waterlogged lily, the same flower that grew by the lake where Sarah died. I remembered Helen always hated lilies. Sarah loved them. This was a message, but not from Helen. Someone else was involved. There was a knock on the door. Through the peephole, I saw the man from the photo holding a small wrapped box. I had to confront the man and uncover his role. It put my safety at risk. I was alone in the house with him. I opened the door, my hand gripping a knife behind my back. He introduced himself as Robert, Helen's old associate. He offered the box, saying it was a peace offering from Helen. I took it, my eyes never leaving his. Inside was a stack of old letters, love letters between Helen and Robert, dated around Sarah's death. One mentioned silencing the little problem. My stomach churned. Robert smiled, his eyes cold. "Helen sent me to ensure you understand. Drop this, or things will get messy." I stood my ground, asking why he was involved. He admitted he owed Helen for covering his debts, but now he wanted out. Then a car screeched to a halt outside. Helen's car. She jumped out, furious, yelling at Robert to leave. They argued on my lawn, Helen accusing him of betrayal. I watched, the letters clutched in my hand. Helen turned to me, her face pleading. "Maggie, he's lying. He's trying to frame me." But Robert laughed, pulling out a USB drive. "The proof is here, Maggie. All of it." Helen snatched it from him, but I grabbed her arm. The USB drive fell and cracked open, revealing it was empty, a decoy. Robert's smile widened. "I already gave the real one to the police." Helen's face went pale. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. I had to secure the real evidence before the police arrived, or Helen might weasel out again. I risked losing my last shred of family trust. I pushed past Helen and Robert, running inside to call my lawyer. But Helen followed, her eyes wild. "You'll ruin everything, Maggie!" she screamed. Robert tried to stop her, but she shoved him aside. I reached for my phone, but Helen knocked it from my hand. "It's too late," she hissed. Then my grandson's voice echoed from the hallway. He'd come home early and witnessed the fight. "Grandma, what's happening?" he asked, scared. Helen's demeanor shifted instantly. She became the doting aunt, soothing him. But I saw the fear in her eyes. I pulled my grandson close, whispering for him to go to his room. As he left, Helen leaned in, her voice a whisper. "I didn't mean to kill her, Maggie. It was an accident. Robert made me cover it up for money." I realized Helen was confessing, but only to shift blame. The sirens stopped outside. Officers approached the door. Helen straightened, wiping her tears. "I'll tell them it was all Robert," she said calmly. But as the doorbell rang, Robert pulled a small recorder from his pocket. "I've got every word, Helen." The front door swung open, and a detective stepped in, his eyes scanning the scene, asking who wanted to start talking. The detective's gaze fixed on the recorder in Robert's hand, and I knew this was the moment truth would out. I just had to get that recording to the police before Helen could weasel her way out. I was risking my grandson's innocence, his wide eyes absorbing the ugliness of adults. Helen stepped forward, her voice dripping with false concern. "Officer, this man is harassing us. He's unstable." Robert laughed, holding up the recorder. "It's all here. Her confession." The detective, a stern man named Briggs, motioned for it. But as Robert handed it over, Helen lunged, knocking it from his grasp. The device skittered across the floor, under the sofa. Briggs sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. "Everyone, calm down." My heart hammered. I needed that evidence. I dropped to my knees, scrambling for the recorder. My fingers brushed against it, but Helen's shoe came down, crushing it under her heel. "Oops," she said, smiling sweetly. Robert's face fell. "You bitch," he muttered. Briggs ordered them both to step outside for questioning. As they moved, I noticed a flicker of movement from Robert's pocket. He slipped a small, identical recorder into his hand and palmed it to me when Briggs wasn't looking. Our eyes met. He gave a slight nod. Helen was led out, protesting her innocence, but Briggs assured me they'd take statements. I clutched the new recorder, my hand trembling. Once alone, I played it quietly. Helen's voice was clear. I had to do it. Sarah saw us embezzling from the family trust. Robert promised me a cut, but the kid wouldn't stop crying. Then, a new voice cut in. A man I didn't recognize, harsh and commanding. "Clean it up, or you're both dead." The recording ended abruptly. I sank onto the couch, the weight of 30 years crushing me. This wasn't just Helen. There was someone else involved. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Destroy the copy, or the boy gets hurt." I looked out the window and saw my grandson playing in the yard, unaware of the danger. A black sedan idled at the curb, the same one from before. I had to protect my grandson and decipher who the unknown voice belonged to. It was costing me my sanity, with every shadow now a threat. I ushered my grandson inside, locking the doors. I called my son, insisting he pick up the boy immediately for a fun weekend, making up an excuse about a sudden trip. He agreed, concerned by my tone. After they left, I focused on the recorder. I made a digital copy and hid the original in a safe place. Then, I searched online for voices matching the recording using a sound analysis app I'd downloaded. It flagged similarities to a local businessman, Frank Talbot, who had ties to Helen's old ventures. My hands shook as I read his profile. A man with a reputation for silencing problems. The doorbell rang, startling me. It was Detective Briggs, back with an update. "Helen's released for now. Insufficient evidence. Robert's in custody for unrelated fraud." My heart sank. Briggs eyed me carefully. "Mrs. Wilkins, if you have anything, now's the time." I almost handed him the recorder, but then I remembered the threat to my grandson. I lied, saying I had nothing new. After he left, I felt a wave of isolation. I needed to confront Frank Talbot myself. I drove to his office, a sleek building downtown. The receptionist said he was out, but I saw his car in the parking lot. I waited, my resolve hardening. Hours passed, and as dusk fell, Frank emerged, talking on his phone. I approached him, holding up the recorder. "I know what you did," I said, my voice steady. He froze, his eyes narrowing. "You're the sister," he muttered, then smiled. "Helen should have handled you years ago." He grabbed my arm, but I pulled away. "The police have copies," I bluffed. He laughed, low and menacing. "I own the police, old woman." Then his phone buzzed, and he glanced at it, his smile fading. "We have a problem," he said into the phone, then turned to me. "Your grandson's school just called a lockdown. Prank call, they say." He walked away, leaving me frozen in fear. I needed to verify the school lockdown and expose Frank's network. It cost me every bit of peace I had left. I raced to the school, but it was calm. No lockdown, no panic. The principal confirmed it was a hoax call, traced to a burner phone. Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. I knew Frank was toying with me. I drove to Helen's house, determined to find more proof. Her car was gone, but I used my key again. Inside, I searched her bedroom, finding a hidden safe behind a painting. I couldn't open it, but I noticed photos tucked in a book. Helen and Frank at various events, always close. One showed them at the lake, years ago, with Sarah in the background. My breath hitched. Then, my phone rang. It was Helen, her voice frantic. "Maggie, where are you? We need to talk." I stayed silent, listening. "Frank's gone rogue. He's planning something big." I asked why I should believe her. She cried, "Because I'm scared too. He killed Sarah, not me. I just covered it up." The line went dead. I pocketed the photos and left. Back in my car, I noticed a slip of paper stuck under the wiper. A handwritten note. "Meet me at the lake, midnight. Come alone, or the boy suffers." It was signed with a crude drawing of a lily. My hands trembled on the wheel. I knew it was a trap, but I had to go. I drove home to prepare, but when I arrived, my front door was ajar. Inside, the place was ransacked. Drawers emptied, furniture overturned. On the kitchen table, another waterlogged lily lay amid the chaos. My safe was open, and the recorder was gone. But they missed the digital copy I'd hidden in a fake electrical outlet. I checked it. Still there. Then, a noise from the basement. A faint shuffling. I grabbed a flashlight and crept down, my heart pounding. In the dim light, I saw Robert tied to a chair, bruised and gagged. He mumbled through the cloth, his eyes wide with panic. I had to free Robert and learn why he was here, risking my own safety in the process. I untied him, my hands shaking. He gasped. "Frank's men did this. They think I talked to you." I asked what he knew. He revealed Frank was embezzling from a charity Helen ran, and Sarah witnessed it. Helen was supposed to scare her, but Frank held her under too long. My vision blurred with rage. Robert handed me a key, the safe from Helen's house. Proof is in there. Bank records, photos. I needed to get that safe open before midnight. We left the basement, but as we reached the kitchen, headlights swept across the window. A car pulled up, and Helen stepped out, alone. She knocked, calling my name softly. Robert hid in the pantry. I opened the door, wary. Helen looked exhausted, her makeup smeared. "Maggie, I'm sorry. I'll confess everything, but you have to help me. Frank's coming for me too." I let her in, my distrust simmering. She saw the mess and gasped. "He was here?" I nodded, showing her the note. She paled. "Don't go. It's a suicide mission." But I had to. My grandson's safety was on the line. Helen offered to come with me, to turn herself in. We agreed to meet at the police station after I retrieved the safe contents. She left, and Robert emerged, skeptical. "She's lying. She's working with Frank." I didn't know who to believe. I drove to Helen's, using the key to open the safe. Inside, I found stacks of cash, documents, and a dated journal. I skimmed it. Helen's handwriting detailed Frank's orders and her guilt. But one entry stood out. Maggie can never know the truth about the trust fund. As I read, my phone buzzed. A message from Helen. Don't trust Robert. He's Frank's mole. I looked at the journal again. The last page was torn out. I heard a car door slam outside. Peeking through the window, I saw Frank and two men approaching the house, armed. I had to escape with the evidence and get to the police. But that meant I couldn't trust anyone. I stuffed the journal and documents into my bag, then slipped out the back door into the night. I could hear Frank's men searching the house behind me. I ran through the backyard, toward the woods that bordered the property. My phone vibrated. It was Robert, texting. "Where are you? I have backup." But Helen's warning echoed in my mind. I didn't reply. I reached my car, parked a street over, and drove toward the police station. Halfway there, I realized I was being followed. A dark SUV tailgating me. I took sharp turns, losing them in a residential area. I pulled over in a quiet lot to catch my breath. I called Detective Briggs, but it went to voicemail. I left a message, urging him to meet me at the station with urgency. Then, I checked the journal more closely. The torn page's edge revealed a handwritten number, a bank account. I recognized it as my late husband's, from the family trust. Helen had been siphoning funds for years, and Sarah must have discovered it. This was the motive. My hands trembled as I connected the dots. I drove to the station, but as I parked, I saw Helen waiting outside, alone. She waved me over, her face anxious. "Maggie, thank God you're safe. I have something for you." She handed me an envelope. Inside was the torn page from the journal, a confession in her writing, admitting everything and implicating Frank. "I'm turning myself in," she said, tears in her eyes. But as she spoke, I noticed a faint red laser dot on her chest from a nearby rooftop. I shoved her aside just as a shot rang out, shattering the station's window. Helen screamed, and chaos erupted. Police swarmed out, but the shooter was gone. I lay on the ground, the envelope clutched in my hand, and saw Helen staring at me, her expression unreadable. Then she mouthed two words. "He knows." Helen's whispered words, "He knows," echoed in my ears as police officers swarmed around us, shouting and securing the area. I had to get the evidence to Detective Briggs immediately, before Frank could silence us for good. I was putting my own safety on the line. I was a target in the open. I clutched the envelope with Helen's confession, pulling her into the station lobby. Briggs rushed over, his face grim. "We have a sniper in the area. Stay down," he ordered. Helen trembled beside me, her eyes darting wildly. "Frank knows I talked," she breathed. "He'll kill us all." I handed Briggs the envelope, explaining it contained proof of Frank's involvement in Sarah's death and the embezzlement. He skimmed it, then nodded to an officer. "Get them to a safe room." As we were escorted away, I noticed Robert across the street, watching from his car, his expression unreadable. Inside the safe room, Helen broke down, sobbing. "I never meant for any of this, Maggie. Frank threatened my life if I didn't cover up Sarah's death." I asked why she kept silent for 30 years. She looked away, ashamed. "The money. I was greedy." Just then, Briggs entered, holding an evidence bag. "We found the sniper's rifle on a rooftop, but no one was there. The serial numbers filed off." He turned to Helen. "We need your full statement." She agreed, but as she started speaking, the lights flickered and went out. Emergency lighting kicked in, casting eerie shadows. A voice crackled over Briggs's radio. "Breach in the evidence room. Someone's tampering with the Wilkins case files. Briggs rushed out, leaving an officer with us. Helen grabbed my arm, her grip tight. Frank has people inside the police. We're not safe here. The officer stepped outside to check the hallway, and we heard a scuffle, then silence. Helen pushed me toward a back exit. We have to run. Now. As we slipped into the alley, I saw the officer slumped against the wall, unconscious. A figure emerged from the shadows, Robert, holding a keycard. "I'm here to help," he said, but his eyes shifted nervously. He handed me a burner phone. "Frank's planning to frame you for the embezzlement. He planted documents in your house." I took the phone, unsure who to trust. Then it vibrated with a text. "Check the safe deposit box. Key in your locket." I never wore a locket. Sarah did. I reached into my pocket and felt a small, cold metal object, a key I'd never seen before. I needed to access that safe deposit box to clear my name and uncover Frank's full scheme. It meant risking exposure by leaving police protection. Helen insisted we split up. She'd draw attention while I went to the bank. I agreed, though I didn't trust her fully. Robert drove me, his hands shaky on the wheel. "Frank's men are everywhere," he muttered. I asked why he was helping me. He sighed. "I loved Sarah too, in my own way. I was weak, but I can't let Frank win." We reached the bank, but it was closed for the evening. I used the key on the after-hours deposit slot, but it didn't fit. Robert pointed to a side entrance. "Maintenance door. I know the code from my old job." He typed in a number, and the door clicked open. Inside, it was dark and silent. We found the safe deposit box area, and my key opened box 347. Inside, I found old photos of Sarah and Helen, but also a stack of financial records showing Frank's transfers to offshore accounts. Then, I noticed a small sealed envelope labeled "For Maggie's Eyes Only." I opened it. It was a letter from my late husband, written before he died. "If you're reading this, Helen has betrayed us. She's been stealing from the trust, and I suspect she harmed Sarah. I hid this evidence to protect you." My hands trembled. He knew all along. Robert grabbed my arm. "We have to go. Security cameras." But as we turned, the lights blazed on. 2 security guards stood there, tasers drawn. "Freeze! You're trespassing." Robert raised his hands, but I slipped the letter into my sleeve. One guard recognized me from the news. "You're that grandmother from the shooting." They called the police. I knew if Briggs arrived, Frank's inside men might intercept us. Then my burner phone rang. I answered. It was Helen, whispering. "Don't trust Robert. He's the one who planted the locket key. It's a trap." I looked at Robert, who was smiling faintly. The guards advanced, and Robert stepped forward. "I'll handle this," he said, then turned to the guards. "She's confused. Let me take her home." One guard nodded, lowering his taser. Robert reached for me, but I backed away. "You knew about the letter," I accused. His smile vanished. "Frank pays well." The guards moved to restrain me, but I ducked under a desk, hitting a panic button. Alarms blared, and the guards hesitated. Robert lunged for the evidence, but I kicked it away. The door burst open, and Detective Briggs stood there, his gun drawn. "Everyone, hands up!" he shouted. Robert raised his hands, but I saw him slip something into his pocket, a small metallic object. Briggs eyed me. "Maggie, what are you doing here?" I held up the letter. "Proof," I said. But then Briggs's radio crackled. "Officer down at the station. Helen's missing." Briggs's face hardened. "We have to go. Now." As we left, I noticed Robert wasn't handcuffed. He was walking freely beside Briggs. Briggs glanced at me. Robert's been working with us undercover. My mind reeled. Robert winked. Surprise. I had to verify Robert's true allegiance and find Helen before Frank did. Trusting anyone could get me killed. In the car with Briggs and Robert, I stayed silent, clutching the letter. Briggs explained Robert had been feeding information to the police for months, but Frank's network was deeper than they thought. Helen's the key, Briggs said. She knows where Frank stashes his records. I asked why Robert pretended to be against me. He shrugged. Had to make it convincing. Frank's paranoid. But I remembered Helen's warning and the planted key. Something felt off. We arrived at a secure house outside town, where Briggs said we'd regroup. Inside, I used the bathroom to read the letter again. My husband's handwriting was faint, but clear. Helen confessed to me before I died. She didn't mean to kill Sarah, but Frank forced her. I hid the truth to protect you from revenge. My heart ached. He suffered in silence. I flushed the toilet to cover noise and slipped the letter back. When I returned, Briggs was on the phone, his expression tense. Frank's men are closing in. We need to move. Robert offered to check the perimeter. Once he was gone, Briggs leaned close. Maggie, I think Robert's playing both sides. His bank accounts show recent large deposits from Frank's shell companies. I nodded, relieved I wasn't alone in my suspicion. We decided to lure Robert into a confession. Briggs pretended to get a call and stepped outside, leaving me with a hidden recorder. Robert returned, smiling. All clear. I confronted him about the deposits. His smile faded. You shouldn't have dug that deep, Maggie. He pulled a knife, but I was ready. I'd palmed a heavy ashtray. I swung it, hitting his arm. The knife clattered away. Briggs burst in, tackling Robert. You're under arrest, he growled. Robert laughed. Too late. Frank has Helen, and he's going to make her talk. Briggs cuffed him, then turned to me. We have to find her. Frank's last known location is the old warehouse by the docks. We sped there, sirens blaring. As we approached, I saw Helen's car parked outside, the driver's door open. Inside the warehouse, it was dark and smelled of oil. We crept in, guns drawn. A voice echoed from the shadows. I've been waiting, Maggie. Frank stepped into the light, holding Helen at gunpoint. She was gagged, her eyes pleading. Frank smiled. Let's end this. But then Helen bit his hand, breaking free. She ran toward me, but Frank fired. The shot echoed, and Helen collapsed. I rushed to her, but Frank aimed at me. Your turn, he said. Suddenly the warehouse doors slammed shut, plunging us into darkness. A single spotlight clicked on, illuminating Frank, and behind him, my grandson stood, holding a baseball bat. I had to save my grandson and stop Frank, even if it meant sacrificing myself. The thought of putting a child in danger was unbearable. In the dim light, I screamed for my grandson to run, but he stood frozen, tears streaming down his face. Frank laughed, turning the gun between us. Family reunion, he sneered. Helen moaned at my feet, bleeding from the shoulder. I knelt, applying pressure to her wound. Stay with me, I whispered. She gripped my hand. I'm sorry, Maggie, for everything. Briggs moved slowly, trying to flank Frank, but Frank spotted him. Ah, the detective. I own your boss, remember? Briggs froze. Then my grandson shouted, Leave my grandma alone! And swung the bat, hitting Frank's leg. Frank roared in pain, firing wildly. The shot hit an overhead light, sending sparks raining down. In the chaos, I tackled Frank, grabbing for the gun. We struggled, rolling on the concrete. He was stronger, but I remembered Sarah's face, her laughter, her life, and found a surge of strength. I bit his arm, and he dropped the gun. Briggs rushed in, cuffing Frank. "It's over," he said. But Frank smiled bloodily. "You think so? Check your phone, Briggs." Briggs's phone buzzed. He paled. "The station's been compromised. Evidence is gone." My grandson hugged me, sobbing. I held him tight, reassuring him. Helen was stabilized by paramedics who arrived soon after. As they loaded her into an ambulance, she gestured for me. "The real evidence is in Frank's boat," she whispered. "The Serenity, Dock 7. I told Briggs, and we raced to the docks. The boat was a sleek yacht, locked tight. Briggs forced the door, and inside we found a hidden compartment with files, cash, and a digital ledger detailing Frank's crimes. But as we gathered it, I noticed a photo tucked in the ledger, my grandson, with a red X drawn over it. My blood ran cold. Briggs assured me he'd put a guard on my family, but I knew Frank's reach was long. We returned to the station, where Frank was in custody. But as I gave my statement, a lawyer arrived, a slick man in a suit, and handed Briggs a document. "My client has immunity," the lawyer said. "He's been working with the FBI on a bigger case." Briggs read it, his face falling. "It's legitimate." Frank smirked at me. "See you around, Maggie." He walked free, escorted by the lawyer. I stood there, stunned. All that effort, and he was untouchable. Briggs apologized, but it was hollow. I drove home, exhausted. When I arrived, my house was dark. I entered, flipping on the light, and froze. On the kitchen table sat a single, waterlogged lily, and beside it, a note. "The game's not over." My phone rang. It was my son, his voice panicked. "Mum, where's Jamie? He's not in his room." I had to find Jamie before Frank could harm him, and this time I couldn't rely on the police. I was losing my last shred of hope. I was alone in this fight. I called Briggs, but he didn't answer, likely dealing with the fallout. I searched Jamie's room. His window was open, and a small, muddy footprint was on the sill. My heart raced. I remembered Frank's boat. Maybe he took Jamie there as leverage. I drove to Dock 7, my hands shaking on the wheel. The Serenity was gone, but a fisherman nearby said he saw it head toward the old lake where Sarah died. I knew then Frank was taunting me with the past. I sped to the lake, parking hidden in the trees. I crept toward the shore, the moon casting long shadows. The boat was anchored nearby, lights off. I waded into the cold water, my breath misting. I could hear voices, Frank's and another man's. They were on the boat, and Jamie was with them, crying. I climbed aboard silently, using the ladder at the stern. Peeking through a window, I saw Jamie tied to a chair, Frank standing over him. "Your grandma should be here soon," Frank said. The other man was Robert, free and smiling. "She'll come for the kid." My blood boiled. Robert was never on our side. I needed a distraction. I spotted a flare gun in a storage box nearby. I loaded it and fired into the sky. The bright arc lit up the night, drawing shouts from the boat. Frank and Robert rushed on deck, looking for the source. I slipped inside, untied Jamie, and whispered for him to hide under the deck. But as I turned, Frank blocked the doorway. "Predictable," he said. Robert grabbed me from behind. "Time to end this." Frank raised a knife. "You should have died with your daughter." But then, a voice shouted, "Freeze! Police!" Briggs and his team surrounded the boat, guns drawn. Helen was with them, her arm bandaged. "I talked," she said. "I gave them everything." Frank snarled, lunging at me, but Briggs fired a warning shot. In the confusion, Robert tried to flee, but I tripped him and he fell overboard. Frank was subdued and cuffed. Jamie ran to me. Safe. Briggs explained Helen had provided recorded testimony from the hospital, implicating Frank and his network. As Frank was led away, he glared at me. "This isn't over." But I held Jamie close, feeling a sliver of peace. Back on shore, Briggs assured me Frank would face charges with Helen's cooperation. I drove home with Jamie, finally able to breathe. But when I tucked him into bed, I found a small, folded note in his pocket. It read, "He has friends in high places. Watch your back." I crumpled it, realizing the fight might never truly end. The phone rang. It was Helen, calling from a secure line. "Maggie, we need to talk. About who else is involved." I listened, my exhaustion warring with dread. She said a name I never expected. Someone from my own family. Helen's voice crackled through the phone, naming my son David as Frank's inside man. I dropped the receiver, my mind reeling. I had to confirm this betrayal and uncover why my own child would side with Sarah's killer. It meant destroying the last remnant of my family trust. I drove to David's house, my hands clenched on the wheel. His car was in the driveway, lights on inside. I used my key to enter, calling his name. He emerged from the study, smiling warmly. "Mom? What a surprise." I cut straight to it, asking about Frank. His smile vanished. "Who told you that?" I mentioned Helen's call. He laughed, but it was strained. "She's lying to save herself." Then his phone buzzed. He glanced at it and paled. "I have to go." He tried to push past me, but I stood firm. "Not until you explain." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It's complicated, Mom. Frank offered me a way out of debt after Dad died." My heart broke. My husband's trust fund was meant to secure our future. David admitted he'd been funneling information to Frank for years, but swore he never knew about Sarah's murder. I didn't believe him. I noticed a file on his desk labeled Lake Property. I grabbed it, but he snatched it back. "That's private." We struggled, and papers scattered. Among them, I saw a photo of David and Frank at the lake, years ago, with Sarah in the background, just like in Helen's photos. David saw my recognition and backed away. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this," he muttered. Then, the front door burst open. Briggs stood there, gun drawn. "David Wilkins, you're under arrest for conspiracy." David raised his hands, but his eyes locked on me. "You brought them here?" I nodded, tears in my eyes. As Briggs cuffed him, David whispered, "Check the safe in my bedroom. You'll understand." Briggs led him out, and I rushed to the bedroom. The safe was open, and inside I found a stack of letters from my late husband to David, pleading with him to stop working with Frank. One letter detailed how David had discovered Frank's embezzlement, but was blackmailed into silence. My hands trembled. David was a victim too. But then, I found a recent note in David's handwriting. "Frank owns the police. Briggs is compromised." I heard a noise behind me and turned. Briggs stood in the doorway, his expression cold. "I'll take that," he said, reaching for the letters. I had to escape with the evidence and expose Briggs's betrayal. My own safety was gone. I couldn't trust anyone now. I shoved the letters into my bag and ducked under Briggs's arm, running for the back door. He shouted after me, but I was faster. I jumped into my car and sped away, my heart pounding. I drove to a secluded park, parking under dense trees. I read the letters carefully. My husband had known about David's involvement and tried to protect him, but Frank's threats were too strong. David's note confirmed Briggs was on Frank's payroll, explaining why Frank walked free earlier. I needed to get this to higher authorities. But who? I called an old friend from the FBI, but the line was dead. My phone showed no signal. Jammed. I realized Briggs could track my car. I abandoned it and started walking, clutching the bag. The night was cold, and I felt every one of my years. I reached a payphone outside a gas station and tried my FBI friend again. He answered, and I quickly explained the situation. He promised to send a team, but warned it might take hours. I hid behind the gas station, watching for pursuers. A car pulled in, Briggs's unmarked vehicle. He stepped out, scanning the area. I held my breath, pressing against the wall. Then, my burner phone vibrated. A text from Helen. "Briggs is coming for you. Meet me at the old mill. I have proof." I didn't know if I could trust her, but I had no other options. I slipped away through the woods, heading toward the mill. It was a long walk, and my legs ached. When I arrived, the mill was dark and decaying. Helen emerged from the shadows, her arm still bandaged. "Maggie, thank God," she said. She handed me a USB drive. "This has everything. Briggs's communications with Frank, bank records, even the order for Sarah's death." I took it, wary. "Why help now?" She looked down. "I'm dying, Maggie. Cancer. I want to make things right." Then headlights swept across the yard. Briggs's voice echoed through a megaphone. "Come out with your hands up." Helen pushed me toward a hidden tunnel. "Go. I'll distract them." I hesitated, but she ran out, shouting. I ducked into the tunnel, but as I did, I heard a gunshot. I glanced back and saw Helen fall. Briggs stood over her, then turned toward the tunnel. I ran, but the tunnel ended at a locked grate. I was trapped. I had to find a way out before Briggs caught me and protect the USB drive at all costs. My body screamed with exhaustion, but Sarah's memory kept me moving. I shoved against the grate. It was rusted, but gave way slightly. I used a loose pipe to lever it open, squeezing through into a storm drain. The air was damp and foul. I followed the drain, emerging near the river. I could hear sirens in the distance. Briggs must have called backup. I needed to get the USB drive to someone trustworthy. I remembered my FBI friend, but my phone was dead. I walked to a nearby convenience store, using their phone to call him. He said a team was en route but delayed. I described my location and hung up. As I waited, I noticed a news report on the store TV, a breaking story about police corruption featuring Briggs's photo. My heart lifted. Someone was already acting. But then, the store clerk eyed me nervously and picked up the phone. I realized my picture might be on the news too. I left quickly, hiding in an alley. The USB drive felt heavy in my pocket. I found a public library nearby and used a computer to check the drive. It contained audio files of Briggs and Frank plotting and documents implicating several officials. But one file was password protected. I tried common passwords, but nothing worked. Then I remembered Sarah's birthday. It worked. The file opened to reveal a video, Helen's confession, recorded recently. She admitted to holding Sarah underwater, but claimed Frank forced her, and that David was unaware until later. She also named others in the network, including a judge. My hands shook as I copied the files to multiple cloud storage accounts. Suddenly, the library lights flickered off. A voice called out, "Mrs. Wilkins, we know you're in here." It was Briggs. I hid under a desk, but he was getting closer. Then, my FBI friend texted my burner phone, "Team is 5 minutes out. Hold position." I couldn't wait. I crawled toward the emergency exit, but it was alarmed. I had no choice. I triggered it and ran. Alarms blared, and Briggs chased me. I dashed into the street, but a car screeched to a halt. It was Robert, free and smiling. "Get in!" he yelled. I hesitated, but Briggs was closing in. I jumped in, and Robert sped away. "I'm here to help," he said. But as we drove, I saw him dial a number. "I have her," he said into the phone. My blood ran cold. I had to escape Robert and get the evidence to safety, even if it meant facing him alone. I was completely isolated, with no one to turn to. As Robert drove, I pretended to calm down, asking where we were going. He said to a safe house, but I knew better. I spotted my chance when he slowed for a red light. I grabbed the wheel, yanking it hard. The car swerved, hitting a curb. Robert cursed, struggling for control. I unlocked my door and rolled out, hitting the pavement hard. Pain shot through my side, but I scrambled up and ran into a crowded mall. I lost myself in the crowd, clutching the USB drive. I found a tech store and bought a cheap laptop and portable Wi-Fi. In a food court corner, I uploaded the files to a secure server and sent the link to my FBI friend. Then, I called him, confirming receipt. He said arrests were imminent, but warned me to lay low. I felt a sliver of hope. But as I stood to leave, I saw Robert entering the mall, scanning the crowd. I ducked into a restroom, locking myself in a stall. My phone buzzed. A message from David, sent from jail. "Mom, I'm sorry. Briggs forced me. He threatened Jamie." My heart ached. My son was a pawn. I replied, telling him I knew and was handling it. Then I heard footsteps in the restroom. Robert's voice echoed. "Maggie, come out. Frank just wants to talk." I stayed silent, but he started checking stalls. I climbed onto the toilet, hiding my feet. He reached my stall, jiggling the lock. Just then, mall security entered, asking what he was doing. Robert backed off, leaving. I waited, then slipped out the window into an alley. I was safe for now, but I needed to ensure Jamie was protected. I called my daughter-in-law, but she didn't answer. I tried again. Still no answer. A bad feeling settled in my gut. I hailed a taxi to her house. When I arrived, the door was ajar. I entered cautiously. The place was ransacked, and no one was home. On the kitchen table, a note. "We have them. Come alone to the warehouse." It was signed with a lily. My legs gave way. Frank had my family. I had to rescue Jamie and my daughter-in-law, ending this nightmare once and for all. I was risking everything, but I had no choice. I drove to the warehouse, my resolve hardening. I parked a block away and approached on foot. The place was silent, but I saw movement inside. I crept in through a broken window. Jamie and his mother were tied to chairs, gagged. Frank stood over them, a gun in his hand. "Took you long enough," he said. I stepped into the light, my hands raised. "Let them go, Frank. It's me you want." He laughed. "Oh, I want it all." He motioned to someone behind me. Briggs emerged, holding cuffs. "You're under arrest, Maggie," Briggs said. But then, sirens wailed outside. Red and blue lights flooded the warehouse. My FBI friend burst in with a team, shouting, "Everyone freeze!" Frank panicked, firing wildly. A shot hit Briggs, who fell. In the chaos, I untied Jamie and his mother, pushing them toward the exit. Frank aimed at me, but I tackled him, and we wrestled for the gun. It went off, and Frank collapsed, clutching his chest. The FBI subdued him. My friend helped me up. "It's over, Maggie. We have all the evidence." Paramedics tended to Briggs, who was alive but wounded. Jamie hugged me, sobbing. I held him tight, feeling a wave of relief. Back at the station, I gave my statement. Frank was in custody, along with several officials. David was released, his charges reduced due to coercion. He apologized, and I forgave him, knowing he was manipulated. Weeks later, the trials began, and justice seemed assured. But as I sat in my garden, planting lilies in Sarah's memory, I received a package, a small wooden box. Inside was a note. Some secrets are buried deeper, and a single old photo of Sarah with a man I didn't recognize standing behind her. I realized the fight for truth was never truly over, but for now, I had peace. I tucked the photo away, vowing to protect my family always. The photo from the wooden box burned in my hands. Sarah, so young and innocent, with a stranger lurking behind her. I had to identify this man and understand his connection to my daughter's death, even if it shattered the fragile peace I'd fought for. I spread the photo on my kitchen table, the morning light highlighting details I'd missed. The man was tall, with a distinctive scar on his left cheek, and he wore a uniform I couldn't place. My hands trembled as I recalled Helen's final words about deeper secrets. I called my FBI contact, but he was unavailable, tied up with the ongoing trials. I was on my own again, risking the safety of my family by digging into the past. I drove to the local historical society, hoping to match the uniform to old records. The librarian, an elderly woman named Mrs. Gable, recognized it immediately. "That's a private security firm from 30 years ago," she said, pulling a dusty yearbook. "They worked for wealthy families around the lake." My heart raced as I flipped through pages, but then my phone buzzed, a text from David. "Mum, someone's asking about you at the house. Be careful." I rushed home, but the street was empty. Inside, I found another note slipped under the door. "Stop looking, or he dies." A photo of Jamie was attached, with a red circle around his face. My blood ran cold. I called David, but he didn't answer. Then the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw a man in a suit, the same one from the photo, older now, the scar still visible. He smiled, holding up a badge. "Mrs. Wilkins, I'm with the FBI. We need to talk." But his eyes didn't match his calm tone. I backed away, locking the door. He knocked again, insistently. "I have information about Sarah," he called out. I peered through the window and saw him dial a number, then speak quickly. "She's not cooperating." A car pulled up, and two men stepped out, heading toward my house. I grabbed the photo and ran to the basement, hiding in the crawl space. The front door creaked open upstairs, footsteps echoing. They were inside. One of them spoke into a radio. "She's here somewhere. Find her." I held my breath, clutching the photo, and noticed something I'd missed. The man's hand was resting on Sarah's shoulder, and he wore a ring with a familiar symbol. It was the same symbol from Frank's old company. Then, a voice whispered from the darkness behind me, "Got you." I had to escape the basement and uncover the ring's significance, but it meant facing armed intruders alone. I spun around, ready to fight, but it was only my grandson Jamie, hiding there after school. "Grandma, I saw them come in," he whispered, terrified. I hugged him, then guided him to a hidden exit behind the water heater. We slipped into the backyard, but the men spotted us and gave chase. We ran through the neighbor's yard, losing them in the alley. I drove us to a motel on the outskirts of town, checking in under a false name. Inside the room, I examined the ring symbol more closely. It matched logos from Frank's offshore accounts. I used my laptop to search, finding it linked to a shell company called Aegis Holdings. My FBI friend had mentioned that name in passing during the trials. I called him again. This time he answered. I described the man with the scar. He grew quiet. "That sounds like Marcus Thorne. He was Frank's enforcer, but he disappeared years ago. If he's back, You're in deep trouble. He promised to send help, but warned it would take time. Jamie fell asleep on the bed, exhausted. I stayed awake, watching the door. Around midnight, a knock came, soft, insistent. I peered through the chain. It was David, his face pale. "Mum, let me in. I have to explain." I hesitated, but opened the door. He rushed in, holding a file. "I found this in Frank's old safe. Marcus Thorne was there the day Sarah died. He works for someone higher up, a judge named Crawford." My mind reeled. Judge Crawford was presiding over Frank's trial. David admitted he'd been threatened into silence, but now wanted to help. Then his phone rang. He glanced at it and froze. "It's Marcus," he answered, putting it on speaker. Marcus's voice was cold. "David, bring your mother to the courthouse. Now, or Jamie pays." The line went dead. David looked at me, tears in his eyes. "I'm sorry, Mom." But as he spoke, I noticed a tracking device stuck to his jacket. He'd led them right to us. Headlights flooded the motel window, and car doors slammed. We were surrounded. I had to protect Jamie and expose Judge Crawford's involvement, even if it meant turning against my own son. I shoved David away, grabbing Jamie and rushing to the bathroom window. We climbed out into the night, but men were already waiting. Marcus Thorne stood there smiling. "Going somewhere, Maggie?" he said, aiming a gun. I pushed Jamie behind me, standing my ground. "Why Sarah?" I demanded. Marcus laughed. "She saw something she shouldn't have. Crawford and Frank discussing a murder cover-up. She was a loose end." My rage boiled over, but then sirens wailed in the distance. Marcus's smile faded. "Cops, let's go." He and his men scattered, but not before he tossed a burner phone at my feet. "Call when you're ready to deal." I picked it up, then hurried Jamie to my car. We drove to a secure location my FBI friend had arranged, a safe house in the woods. Inside, I checked the phone. It had one number saved. I called it, and Judge Crawford answered. "Mrs. Wilkins, so glad you called. Let's meet and discuss this like adults." I refused, but he threatened to dismiss Frank's case if I didn't cooperate. I knew I had to record this. I pretended to agree, setting a meeting at a public park. I contacted my FBI friend, who arranged for backup. At the park, Crawford arrived alone, but I saw Marcus watching from a distance. Crawford sat on a bench, smiling. "You've caused quite a stir, Maggie. But it ends now. Sign this affidavit denying everything, and your family lives." I played along, secretly recording with my phone. Then I asked about Sarah. His face hardened. "She was collateral damage." Frank panicked, and Helen helped cover it up. But as he spoke, Marcus approached, drawing a knife. "Enough talk." My FBI team moved in, arresting Crawford, but Marcus escaped into the crowd. Back at the safe house, I reviewed the recording. It was solid evidence. But my phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "You have one day to hand over the recording, or I'll finish what I started with Sarah." Attached was a photo of Helen's grave, freshly disturbed. I had to use the recording to ensure Crawford's conviction and stop Marcus for good, but it meant walking into a trap. I met with my FBI friend, handing over the recording. He assured me Crawford would be removed from the case, but Marcus was still at large. I knew I had to lure him out. I sent a message agreeing to meet him at the lake where Sarah died, a symbolic place for an end. I brought a hidden camera and a panic button. That night, the lake was eerily calm. Marcus waited by the water, his scar visible in the moonlight. "Where is it?" he demanded. I showed him a fake drive, stalling for time. "Why did you kill my daughter?" I asked, my voice steady. He shrugged. Orders. Crawford wanted a witness silenced. Frank handled it, but I made sure it looked like an accident. My hands clenched, but I kept recording. Then he lunged for the drive, but I triggered the panic button. Lights flooded the area and FBI agents emerged. Marcus laughed, pulling a remote from his pocket. Too late. I planted explosives around the lake. If I don't check in, they blow. The agents froze, and Marcus backed away, disappearing into the woods. We evacuated, but no explosion came. It was a bluff. Back at the safe house, I felt defeated. My FBI friend updated me. Crawford was in custody, but Marcus had vanished. I checked on Jamie, who was safe with his mother. Then my phone rang. It was David, crying. "Mum, I'm so sorry. Marcus has me. He says if you don't come alone to the old mill, he'll kill me." I knew it was a trap, but I couldn't abandon my son. I drove to the mill, armed with a knife and determination. Inside, David was tied to a chair, bruised and bloody. Marcus stood over him, holding a gun. "Finally," he said. "Now where's the real recording?" I threw the fake drive, but he didn't bite. "I know you have copies. Hand them over, or David dies." I stepped forward, ready to fight. But then a shadow moved behind Marcus. Helen's voice echoed from the darkness. "I told you he'd come here." She stepped into the light, alive and holding a gun, pointed at me. I had to survive this confrontation and uncover why Helen was still alive, even if it meant facing my sister's ultimate betrayal. I stared at Helen, my mind racing. "You faked your death," I said, my voice cold. She smiled. "Cancer was a convenient cover. Crawford promised me immunity if I helped tie up loose ends. You." Marcus kept his gun on David, who watched in horror. Helen explained she'd been working with Crawford all along, manipulating Frank and others to protect her own interests. "Sarah was a mistake, but you wouldn't let it go," she sneered. "I needed to distract them and save David." I glanced at the fake drive I'd thrown. It had a tracking device my FBI friend had planted. I hoped backup was coming. I asked Helen why she turned on me after all these years. Her face twisted with rage. "You always had everything. The family, the love. I deserved more." Then, sirens sounded in the distance. Marcus panicked, firing wildly. I tackled Helen, and we struggled for the gun. It went off, and she collapsed, clutching her side. Marcus ran for the exit, but FBI agents swarmed in, arresting him. David was freed, and paramedics tended to Helen. As they loaded her into an ambulance, she whispered, "Check the locket, Maggie. The truth is there." I remembered Sarah's locket, which I'd kept in a box at home. Back home, I found it and opened it. Inside was a tiny photo of Sarah and Helen, but on the back, a date and a name: Crawford. My FBI friend confirmed Crawford had been embezzling from multiple trusts, including ours, and Sarah had witnessed it. With Helen's testimony and the evidence, Crawford was fully implicated. Weeks later, the trials concluded, and justice was served. I sat in my garden, the lilies blooming, and finally felt a sense of closure. But as I tidied up, I found an old journal of Helen's hidden in a drawer, its pages filled with names and dates, suggesting a wider network still intact. I closed it, deciding some battles were for another day. For now, I had my family safe, and that was enough. Helen's journal lay heavy in my hands, its pages filled with names and dates that stretched beyond Crawford and Frank. I had to decide whether to pursue this wider network or burn the journal and reclaim my peace. More digging threatened my sanity. I could feel the weight of 30 years pressing down. I sat at my kitchen table, the morning sun casting long shadows, and traced a name that appeared repeatedly: Arthur Finch, a philanthropist with deep pockets and clean reputation. My phone buzzed. It was David, his voice strained. "Mum, I got a call from an unknown number. They mentioned Finch. I think they're watching us." I told him to stay inside and keep Jamie close. I drove to the local library, using a public computer to research Arthur Finch. His charity work was legendary, but I found old articles linking him to Frank's shell companies. My hands trembled as I printed the documents. On my way out, a man bumped into me, slipping a note into my coat pocket. It read, "Leave Finch alone, or the boy disappears." I rushed home, but when I arrived, the front door was ajar. I entered cautiously, calling for Jamie. He wasn't there. On the floor, a single lily lay crushed, and a voice called from the hallway, "Looking for this?" Marcus Thorne stepped out, holding Jamie by the arm. Jamie's eyes were wide with fear. Marcus smiled. "Finch sends his regards." I stood frozen, my mind racing for a way out. Then, the window shattered, and a brick landed on the floor with a note tied to it. "I have something you need." Outside, a familiar figure waved from the street. Robert, free again, holding a file. Marcus tightened his grip on Jamie, and Robert shouted, "Let the kid go, Marcus. Finch is done." Marcus hesitated, and in that moment, I lunged, grabbing a vase and swinging it at his head. He ducked, releasing Jamie, who ran to me. Robert tossed the file inside, then sped away in a car. Marcus glared, then fled out the back. I hugged Jamie, checking he was unharmed. The file contained photos of Finch with Crawford, and a recording of them discussing Sarah's death. But as I played it, I heard my own name mentioned. They were planning to frame me for the embezzlement. The recording ended with Finch saying, "Maggie Wilkins won't see it coming." I looked at Jamie, his small hand in mine, and knew I had to end this now. My phone rang. It was David screaming, "They have me! Finch's men!" The line went dead. I had to rescue David and use the recording to expose Finch, but it meant walking into a trap set by a powerful man. I dropped Jamie with a trusted neighbor, instructing her to call the FBI if I didn't return in 2 hours. I drove to Finch's estate, a sprawling mansion on the outskirts of town. The gates were open, as if expecting me. I parked and approached the main door, my heart pounding. Inside, the house was opulent and silent. David was tied to a chair in the study, bruised but alive. Arthur Finch sat behind a desk, smiling calmly. "Maggie, so good of you to come," he said. I held up the recording. "I have everything. It's over." Finch laughed. "Do you think that matters? I own the courts, the police. You're nothing." He motioned, and 2 guards stepped forward. I played the recording, but Finch didn't flinch. "Copies won't save you," he said. Then Marcus entered, holding a gun. "Time to clean up," he muttered. I felt a surge of despair, but then the lights flickered. Alarms blared and the guards hesitated. From the hallway, Robert appeared, holding a tablet. "I hacked your security, Finch. The FBI is on their way." Finch's smile vanished. He stood, pulling a knife from his desk. "You'll all die here." Robert tossed me the tablet, showing live footage of FBI agents surrounding the estate. Marcus fired at Robert, but missed, hitting a guard instead. Chaos erupted. I untied David, and we ran for the door. Finch chased us, but Robert tackled him. As we reached the hallway, I saw Marcus aiming at David. I shoved David aside, and the bullet grazed my arm. Pain shot through me, but I kept moving. Outside, FBI agents swarmed in, arresting Finch and Marcus. Robert was cuffed too, but he winked at me. "I owed you one," he said. Paramedics tended to my wound, and David hugged me, crying. But as I caught my breath, my FBI friend approached, his face grim. "We have Finch, but his network runs deep. There's another name. Someone in your family." He handed me a photo from the tablet. My late husband, talking to Finch years ago. My heart stopped. I had to confront the possibility that my husband was involved in this corruption, even if it shattered the memory of the man I loved. It meant losing my past, everything I held dear. I drove home in a daze, the photo burning in my pocket. David followed, silent and supportive. At home, I pulled out old albums, searching for clues. I found a letter from my husband to Finch, dated before Sarah's death, discussing investment opportunities. My hands shook. Was he part of this? I called my FBI friend, but he was unavailable. I decided to visit Helen in the hospital, where she was under guard. She was weak but coherent. I showed her the photo. She sighed. "Your husband knew about the embezzlement, but he was trying to stop it. Finch threatened him, and he backed down. That's why he hid evidence." Relief washed over me, but then Helen added, "But there's more. Finch had a partner, someone you'd never suspect." She coughed, too weak to continue. The nurse ushered me out. Back home, I pored over the journal again and found a coded entry. "The benefactor is close. Watch the family." My phone rang. It was Jamie's school. "Mrs. Wilkins, Jamie was picked up early by his grandfather." I froze. My husband was dead. I called David, but he didn't answer. I raced to the school. But they said a man claiming to be his grandfather showed ID and left with Jamie. Panic set in. I called the FBI, reporting a kidnapping. Then, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Want your grandson back? Come to the cemetery. Alone." I drove to the cemetery, my mind racing. At Sarah's grave, a man stood waiting. It was Arthur Finch's brother, Charles, whom I'd met years ago at family events. He held Jamie, who was crying. "Maggie, finally," Charles said. "You ruined my brother, but I'll finish this." He pulled a gun. "Say goodbye." But then a voice shouted, "Stop!" David emerged from behind a tombstone, holding a rifle. "Let him go, Charles." Charles laughed. "Or what? You'll shoot your own uncle?" David's hands trembled. I realized Charles was David's uncle, my husband's brother, who'd been absent for years. Charles aimed at me, but David fired, hitting Charles's arm. He dropped the gun, and Jamie ran to me. David collapsed, sobbing. "I'm sorry, Mum. I knew he was involved, but I was scared." Charles was arrested, and Jamie was safe. But as we left, I noticed a fresh lily on Sarah's grave with a note. "For Sarah." It was unsigned. I had to ensure Charles was prosecuted and uncover why he targeted us, but it meant dragging more family secrets into the light. It took a toll on David's mental state. He was guilt-ridden and withdrawn. We returned home, and I put Jamie to bed, soothing his fears. The FBI took Charles into custody, and my friend confirmed he was Finch's silent partner, handling the financial side. With Helen's journal and the recordings, the case was solid. Days passed, and the trials began. I testified, my voice steady as I recounted the decades of lies. Finch, Charles, and others were convicted, and the network started to crumble. David entered therapy, and we slowly rebuilt our relationship. I visited Helen one last time. She was fading fast. She whispered, "I'm sorry, Maggie, for everything." I forgave her, not for her sake, but for mine. Back home, I sorted through old boxes, finally ready to let go. I found Sarah's favorite doll, cleaned and preserved, and I held it to my chest, tears flowing. I decided to donate most of the evidence to the FBI, keeping only a few photos for memory. I planted a garden of lilies in the backyard, a tribute to Sarah. As I worked the soil, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. But that night, I received a package, a small wooden box from Helen's lawyer. Inside was a key and a note. For the safe deposit box, the final truth. I hesitated, knowing it could unravel everything again. I drove to the bank, using the key. The box contained a single envelope, my husband's will, updated before he died, leaving everything to me and implicating Charles in the embezzlement. He'd known and tried to protect us. I cried, relief and sorrow mingling. At home, I burned the journal, deciding some truths were better buried. I sat on the porch, watching the sunset, and for the first time, I felt no fear. My phone buzzed. It was David, inviting me for dinner. I smiled, ready to move forward. But as I stood, I saw a car slow down outside, its driver watching me. Then it sped away. The car disappeared around the corner, and I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. I decided not to chase shadows anymore. My family was safe, and that was enough. I locked the door and walked to the kitchen, where the scent of lilies from the garden drifted in through the open window. I made a cup of tea and sat at the table, Sarah's photo beside me. I traced her smile, remembering the good times, her laughter in the backyard, the way she loved feeding the ducks at the lake. The pain was still there, but it was softer now, a part of me rather than a wound. Later, David and Jamie came over for dinner. We ate together, talking about simple things, school, work, plans for a trip to the beach. Jamie showed me a drawing he'd made of Sarah with wings, calling her an angel. I hugged him tight, my eyes moist. After they left, I went to the garden, the lilies glowing in the moonlight. I knelt and placed a small stone on the soil, engraved with Sarah's name. I whispered a goodbye, not to her, but to the anger and revenge that had consumed me. I knew Helen was gone. Finch and Charles were in prison, and the network was broken. There might be others, but I chose to let the authorities handle it. My role was done. The next morning, I donated Sarah's old toys to a local charity, keeping only her locket. I visited the lake one last time, the water calm and clear. I scattered a few petals from the lilies, watching them float away. Back home, I started a new journal, not of secrets, but of memories, happy ones. I wrote about Sarah's first steps, her birthday parties, the way she said, "I love you, Grandma." I closed the journal and placed it on the shelf. From now on, I would focus on the living, David, Jamie, and the peace we'd fought so hard to win. The phone rang. It was my FBI friend, updating me on the cases. I listened, thanked him, and hung up. I looked around my quiet house, filled with light and love, and knew I was finally home. The past was behind me, and the future was mine to cherish.